when you are a guy who's just chasing excellence every single day, the perfect women land at your feet. And so as a guy, if you feel lonely, good. Do something that relates to your improvement of a variable of your life and do it every single day, and I guarantee you that the right women will appear. I think a lot of guys give themselves a tough time with women because they don't have enough frame to actually get the best out of her. Most guys are failing the beta-sization tests that women are putting them through every single day. They're doing exactly as they're told. They're simping essentially, which is, it's just making their life harder. It's creating more complication for them. It's getting less out of their partner, putting more expectations in place for them every single day that they have to fulfill to live a happy life, because most guys are under the impression that happy wife, happy life. And the problem with that is it's a constant bottomless pit of problems that will just spiral and spiral and get worse and worse, because every time that you fail the shit test that she's put you through, she gains more power in the relationship, you lose more frame, and ultimately traditional values as we know them are hindered by a man with no frame. So it just gets worse.
For the sake of the audience, you mentioned a term there, beta-sization. You go a little bit deeper into that. Yeah,
I mean, ultimately, beta-sization is this subconscious activity that the female mind goes through to try and turn every guy that she meets into her dinner cooking, taxi driving, sock drawer organizing slave, basically, to aid in her life. And this isn't something that they do consciously to try and be a bad person or to try and get at the guy that they're considering as a sexual partner. It's something that they do naturally as essentially a subconscious shit test. It's their way of testing, is this guy an alpha male or is this guy a beta male? And so every time that they put you through this test and you comply and you organize a sock drawer, you become a taxi, you cook the dinner. And I'm not saying that any of these things in rare times are a bad thing to do. It's actually a very nice gesture to drive your woman somewhere or to cook a dinner every now and then. But if you become someone who serves them every single day, then they naturally will see you as the beta male, and essentially you become a doormat for this person. Now, most women will make a rule for the beta, but then they will be prepared to break it for the alpha. So if we've got a woman who said that she doesn't have sex on her first date, well, if Cristiano Ronaldo took her out for a date, do you really think she wouldn't have sex for the first time? Because I'm sure she would. So she will break the rule for someone, it just isn't you. And as a guy, if you have that frame of mind whereby you add "for you" onto the end of every statement that you make about women, you get a much better understanding of where you sit in the social hierarchy. She didn't cook dinner for me on the first date. For you. Oh, no, she doesn't have sex on the first date. Well, yeah, for you. If we apply that to our life as guys, when we interact with females, there's a lot to learn about where we sit in the social hierarchy.
So you mentioned there about sock drawer organising and things like that. If it's unfair for a woman to expect that from a guy, then how come it's not the other way around?
Well, every interaction that we have, whether it be in business, friendships, sexual relationships, ultimately it's always transactional to an extent. And so there's an exchange of value happening between men and women. So when they want us to be protective, they want us to provide, that is only the same as us wanting them to deliver on acts of service. This is the value that we bring to each other as sexual partners. So where we expect things to be delivered in terms of acts of service, this is because ultimately that's what a girl wants as well. She will ask you to organize a sock drawer to test whether or not you're a beta. She doesn't actually want you to organize a sock drawer. If you ask any woman on the street, what are you looking for in a guy? I think you will get 0% of people coming back to you as taxi driver, sock drawer organizer, dinner cooker. These are not important traits to a female, but they're easy ways to test whether I'm handling a beta or an alpha. So as a female, ultimately, it's her way of testing, can I respect this male?
I think a really interesting topic, and one that I'd like to get your perspective on, is jealousy as a whole. What makes a person jealous? What is the underlying issue when it comes to jealousy?
The reason why they're jealous is actually a lot of the time because they've been alpha widowed. If you've got a woman that's become very jealous, it's probably because she's been hurt by a previous partner and it's left a dent in her ability to trust and bond monogamously from now forward. If you are hypergamously a better option than a previous partner, this will probably get rid of the jealousy quite quickly on. But if you're not, you're going to be up against it because that angry and fury of the previous partner being hurtful towards her, she will continually take that out on you and it will come out as jealousy. even if she isn't a jealous person by nature, she will appear jealous because she will go further and do more due diligence to try and find your faults. You might notice early on as a guy when you're dating that she knows a lot about you, almost an uncomfortable amount. She stalks your social media. She really picks up on where your eyes are, why you're looking at her, why you said this. That's because she's looking to find faults to make herself feel better and to try and inhibit her ability or inhibit the likelihood of something bad happening to her again. That's ultimately where I think it stems from. But jealousy is something that can quite easily be navigated if you understand who you're working with. If you're dealing with someone who comes across more jealous, it's probably because they're stimulated by the competition anxiety of wanting to now win someone over and not be hurt by them. Whereas the flip side of that would be somebody who's quite peaceful and they're just happy to be monogamously bonded with. So if they sense that you're not potentially monogamous with them, that will upset them and that will create problems with them. But the competition anxiety induced, stressful, jealous type, they need something quite fiery to keep them going. We've noticed the most toxic relationships are also the most stimulating, and that's because often the people involved are people that are stimulated by competition anxiety. They're getting over each other all the time. You know, there's an issue, they break up, they both sleep with someone else, they come back, they make up, they argue with each other for what they did, they find out more problems, they break up. This constant stress of the jealousy and the fury and the promiscuity and the mistreatment of each other's feelings, that's what stimulates them to keep going. Where it gets really difficult and often doesn't work is if we've got somebody like that compared with somebody who's not. That just simply doesn't work. You either need too fiery or too peaceful in order for things to work long term, but they just create two very different dynamics.
So is there a way for these toxic relationships, like you mentioned there, to actually last and go the long run?
If you've got two toxic people that are incredibly jealous and basically fight all the time, then it could last long term, but it's just not going to be very fun to be a part of. But then again, fun is in the eye of the beholder, and often these people are people that want to interact on that level. You know, well, they kind of want to, you've pissed them off, so they kind of want to get you back. And then the fact that you got them back makes them angry and re-stimulates them to want to come back to you because they've seen you with someone else now and they're really upset about that. So then they come back to you, which makes you realize you prefer them to the person that you're now dating. And then it creates this make-up, break-up sex, and it all becomes very stimulating. And for these people that actually enjoy that competition anxiety and that, I guess, stress of wanting to hold on to this person, that's stimulating enough for them to keep coming back to each other. So in theory, it will work long term, but it will work long term on the basis of you both going through hardship together. Whereas I think for guys that are truly chasing excellence and for women of genuine value, that isn't something that you can deal with. That's not an environment for what I would call like a high value relationship. If a guy is high value, he probably is chasing excellence and therefore doesn't have time for this bullshit. And if a girl is genuinely wanting to bond monogamously, she wouldn't tolerate a guy like that. So the best partnerships don't deal with that. And actually it might come across insulting. If you're involved in this stuff, you and your partner are both low value and you need to fix up.
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to like trauma bonding, going through some sort of hardship together, as you mentioned, and that just keeping them together. And it may not be healthy and it may not be what both people want, but then they end up staying together, having a baby together, and then they're stuck together.
I think that toxicity though is what stimulates them, and I think naturally that's why they have that child, because it creates a level of complication and stimulation that they both thrive on.
I feel like sometimes as well in these toxic relationships, when it leads to a pregnancy, it can be sometimes out of spite. So the female will keep a baby, you know, she'll fall pregnant and then keep the baby just to be like, haha, what are you going to do about it? You're mine now. You can't go off. We can't do this breakup, shag other people, come back, etc. This isn't going to work like now because you are now tied to me forever with this baby.
It's a baby trap, and it creates that bond that's being forced just in the same way that the relationship as a whole is being forced because of the anxiety that's created from the competition. They both want to move on. They've both checked out of this relationship, but the jealousy and the competition is what holds them actually moving on. So partner A and B both decided they don't want to be together anymore. Partner A goes off, finds someone else. Partner B goes off and finds someone else. But they both get so jealous, and there is such a level of competition anxiety between them that they actually can't tolerate seeing the other person with another person. And so they then come back merely to just essentially diffuse this jealousy that's been created. And it's the exact same thing with the baby trap. It's just a means of keeping it together to keep themselves stimulated. And ultimately it's a degenerate cycle, a bottomless pit of spiral headaches that just will never fix themselves unless you grow up and walk away.
Yeah, I think a lot of it also will come down to a fear of being alone, fear of loneliness. We see it a lot with people that may have been in relationships from a young age, maybe since school, coming out of school, that could have been 3, 4, 5 years long. And they're now out in the big real world and they're alone for the first time in their life. And the fear of not having someone to share a bed with, not have someone to go on these holidays with, to go out on dates, to ultimately, provide and be a rock for them, that they then live the rest of their life in the coming years in fear that they'll never find anyone again. And that leads to them attaching to themselves to someone too quick after that relationship, even though they may not feel the same way they did about the previous relationship.
The problem is, though, loneliness is a good thing. Loneliness for a girl means that, in fact, it's attractive. As a guy, if you find a girl who is typically on her own a lot, that is because she's ready for a partner. She is ready to bond. She is perfect. And then you've got, on the flip side, as a guy, if you're lonely, well, great, time to get on your hustle. If you're lonely, that means it's time to hustle. People aren't around you right now because God wants to see you hustle. Get to the gym, set your business up, get a good job, whatever it might be, it's up to you. But get onto your hustle in some degree. And then naturally, as I said right at the beginning of this podcast, when you are a guy who's just chasing excellence every single day, the perfect women land at your feet. They really just appear. And so as a guy, if you feel lonely, good. Do something with the loneliness. Don't get upset about it and bond with someone in some toxic relationship. It's a useless time. It has no utility for your future as a top drawer man. Do something that relates to your improvement of a variable of your life and do it every single day, and I guarantee you that the right woman will appear.
In terms of showing acts of affection and validating the girl in terms of compliments, what is your stance on that?
I'm actually a massive fan of validation. I think that it absolutely has a time and a place, and for me personally, I will use things like opening the car door, paying for dinner as a gateway of showing that actually I'm a gentleman. And so I think that it's essential that we do these things, but they have to be done sparingly and when deserved. So if you're buying flowers for a girl that you haven't met before, or you're buying them for somebody that isn't treating you very well, then that's quite challenging to justify as a guy why you would do that. And ultimately she will look at that and think, I'm already getting validation. And the problem is, if we do these things incredibly frequently to begin with, the meaning of those diminishes every time we do it. The more rare something is, the more sought after it is. The same way that a GC3 RS will always be a lot more desirable than a 911 Carrera, because there's less of them produced. The higher the frequency of something, the less desirable it becomes. So if we absolutely pepper them with compliments on Instagram, comments on their post, we spam loads of nice DMs, and then we turn up gift, 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 compliment, 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 each one diminishes in value every time you do it. If we sparingly use these validation tools only when absolutely necessary and when we absolutely mean it, it means a lot more. For example, if I said to this woman that I think she looks really beautiful today, and this is the first time that I've said it, but I've been dating her for 2 months, you know she's going to go home and feel really good about herself. Whereas if within 5 seconds of meeting her, without confidence, I've said, oh, you look nice today, and then an hour later I was like, you look nice today, it just suddenly becomes invaluable.
As a man in 2024, how can you separate yourselves from the other guys who are going after the sort of women that you're looking for?
I think the biggest mistake that guys make is that they don't actually understand the female mind and they don't understand what women are after. Almost all women are hypergamous, so they're looking to find somebody who is across or above them on the social hierarchy. Now, this can be for any reason. It could be that the guy that she wants is the guy who's in the best shape. It could be the guy who's the best at a certain sport. It might be that she wants or she sees a celebrity that she likes or a political figure. It might be a guy who makes a load of money, drives a really nice car. Maybe he's just the owner of a big company and he has lots of people that work for him. It can be anything, but what she's looking for is somebody who is socially across or above. And if we understand that, and the girl that you're dating is somebody who either makes more money, maybe she's in better shape than you are. If you've got a gym girl and you're out of shape, it's always going to play on her mind that on that level, she technically isn't looking socially up or across at you. And so we've got to consider that at all times, because hypergamy is a real thing and women definitely chase it. Other than that, it's a basic, really. We all know what they want. They want a virtuous alpha male that is physically capable, able to protect and provide, financially free, or having the means to. I think a lot of them will not only aspire to have somebody that is good at certain things, but also very aspirational. You know, there are guys maybe that don't make the most money or aren't in the best shape right now, but because they're trying very hard and they're working on their flaws, that's still quite attractive to a woman. But if you're a guy who's just vaping and going on nights out, you're out of shape, you make no money and not seen to be doing anything about it, I think you're going to struggle to date successfully with 99% of women there.
You mentioned the word there, hypergamy. Just for the sake of the audience, what does that actually mean?
Well, essentially, hypergamy is just the act of looking across or up in society. So this could be educationally, this could be financially, this could be physically or socially in terms of your status and your power in the public eye. Really, any measure of someone's success in any capacity. Hypergamy is the art of the woman typically looking across or up at that. That is what hypergamy basically is.
So you mentioned there about females wanting to date on or above their level in a social hierarchy sort of sense. What are some simple things that a guy can do in order to bring up their sexual marketplace value?
Well, as a guy, I mean, ultimately, the key thing here is to try and look like you're doing something about your current weaknesses. I think that's the easiest way to summarize, the best way to go about it. Because ultimately, you don't have to be perfect at everything. Very few guys are. And in fact, most women aren't looking for perfection. They're just looking for a guy who's either in a good position or he's doing something about it to get into a good position. So he's either got to be in shape or he's got to be working hard to get in good shape. He's got to be rich or he's got to be working hard to get rich. He's got to be physically capable or working hard to become physically capable. Ultimately, whatever it is, as a guy, if you're working on your weaknesses and you're playing to your strengths, you're going to have a good time with women. It really can be that simple.
And for those people who say that you shouldn't chase women and it shouldn't be at the forefront of your mind when it comes to these sort of things, what would your response to that be?
I agree. I don't think it's something that you should go out of your way to prioritize. I think if you're living a life with purpose and you're chasing your dreams every day, as a top drawer man would anyway, then ultimately women are going to turn up at the door. You know, they start to express interest in you. And as a top drawer man who's going through that process of leveling up each individual variable and chasing excellence every day, it's actually a really fulfilling moment when you start to see, oh, wow, like the girls DM me now. You know, I don't actually always have to DM them because they DM me. And, you know, when I go up into the street, actually girls talk to me now. That's very fulfilling. And as a guy chasing excellence, it gives you the confidence to keep going.
For a man who's on a mission of achieving excellence and achieving top drawer man status and has been with a female from before their success or before starting their journey, what would you say to those who are having doubts or second thoughts about whether she is the right woman to be by his side on that journey?
Well, if you're in a position where the girl that you're currently dating doesn't align with what you're actually looking for now, then you've got to ask the question of, does this still make sense? You know, it's not uncommon to outgrow your partner. In fact, as sad as it might be as a time for you as a person and for them, actually, deep down for you, this is a huge win because you've leveled up. Now, if she didn't level up with you, that's a shame, especially if you really enjoyed spending time. But ultimately, for you, if you're leveling up, that's not actually a bad thing. I don't think for guys that are young, it's a bad idea to just kind of let things happen organically. You know, if you are in the world of dating without any pressure and you're just going on dates and kind of spending time with her, date for a couple of months, move on, it doesn't work out, date again, that's not a bad place to be because you're gaining experience. Now, the experience is not only good for you because it's practice essentially, but it's also great because you start to become very in tune with what you're looking for in the ideal person. You start to understand what you like physically, how you like them to dress, how you like them to behave. You can work out what kind of things work well for you in terms of the way that you dress, the way that you smell, the places that you go, the game essentially that you're dropping on all of these girls. You know, it's teaching you lessons about yourself and it's also helping you understand more about who you're looking for. So I think there's actually, for a younger guy, so much value in just kind of letting things rest. When you get to an older age, you're 40, you're 50, of course you need to have a little bit of a think now. What am I actually going to do here? What do I want? But as a young guy, you navigate in the world, don't stress about it.
So when it comes to finding a partner who is going to potentially, mother your children, what are the sort of things that you're looking for from her?
I mean, ultimately, wife, mother to the kids, however you want to define it, a long-term partner needs to meet a set criteria that you will have to decide for yourself. I mean, traditionally, if we look at what most men that we admire will look for in a woman that they want to spend a lot of time with: great culinary skills, warm energy around the house, an actual internal desire to look after the home, the cooking, the cleaning, not in an obligatory fashion where you've told her to do it and therefore she does it, but actually someone that internally likes that and is stimulated by that housewifery behavior. That's something that I think any guy that we admire would appreciate long term. But maybe not other people care about that. I know for me, I find acts of service, I find culinary skills, those sort of things are super attractive to me. But for another guy out there, it might be different. So it's got to be a genuine question that you ask yourself of what are you actually looking for? And you've got to be honest with yourself. And as a guy as well, you've got to really chase that excellence. If she's half perfect, then it's not the right one. And it's okay to accept that. And actually, there's a certain aura about you when you know what you're after that they can sense. If you're willing to accept what you get, you will get what you're given. Whereas if you're actually chasing excellence, not just in yourself, but in the women that you meet day to day, actually that excellence, it's attracted to you because your aura is pulling it in.
So you'll hear women say all the time, he's not my type. My type is X. I like someone who does X, behaves in X way, etc. Do you think that a girl's type can change as they mature? Or do you feel as if, as you mentioned there, whenever the alpha comes along, that their type may just be that their type is just the alpha male in this example?
They're always drawn to the most virtuous alpha male that they can find and their best hypergamous option. And if they really like guys that are blonde, but this brown-haired, virtuous alpha, 6'3" in great shape, multimillionaire, turns up at the door, the blonde guy that she's currently dating, who isn't those things, suddenly becomes of less interest. And I think that is probably the best example for where type is secondary. Type is secondary to that of value, ultimately. Initial attraction, value, carry more weight than a type typically does. Now, sure, there are always things that we're looking for. There are things that I typically have found myself to be more attracted towards when I'm dating certain girls. But there has also been times when whatever I thought I was interested in has suddenly become less materially valuable to me because I actually just really liked her energy. Energy and value carry more weight. And so I think as a guy, again, don't worry about the type. What relevance does it really have? If you're as virtuous and as much of an alpha as you want to be, you're going to clean up.
What would your response be to women that say that they're not bothered about money and they're not bothered about muscles and that they want to connect with someone on a deeper level?
Well, either one, they're lying, which is the most probable case, and they're just attempting to beta size, which is natural because it's the process that they undergo consistently. Oh no, I just want someone to watch Netflix with me. That would be nice, just to spend the evenings with me and not worry about work and the gym. I just want to spend time. It's a beta-sization test because then if he actually does do that and he's not got purpose, he's not working hard, he's not in shape, you're going to hate him and cheat on someone else. So it's really difficult to kind of listen to girls in that sense because they will often say something that's very different to what they actually mean. And if you challenge them on it, most of them will come to the realization that actually, I don't want what I say I want. Now, there's going to be examples where girls want something and they're truthful to it and it doesn't align with the traditional values that we expect, which is normal because there are guys out there that are accepting what they're given. So there's real life scenarios of people that aren't chasing excellence in the partners that they look for, and that's fine. But if we're speaking about women at their happiest and men at their happiest, understanding the values that each other are after is a surefire way to find a good partner.
How do you feel about the impact that over-sexualization and overstimulation in a sexual format in terms of watching too much porn, masturbating all the time, how does that play? What role does that play in being out in the real world with girls?
Well, the role that it definitely doesn't play is the main character role, because instead you end up playing as a tree on the side of Oliver Twist. You become a dormant figure in an ongoing play. You are not the main character anymore. When you're stimulated by dopamine, you start to watch others. And watching others is the role of somebody who doesn't aspire to be the main character. If you want to be the main character, it's doing everything. It's not watching YouTube, it's not watching porn. It's doing what's in the video and having the sex. You've got to be a doer. You've got to get up and do things, not just watch things. Watching is a disease and doing is the answer. You've got to get up and do something.
So what would you say is the number one thing in terms of attracting a woman? Like, what is the most important thing that a man must have or do in order to attract a woman?
It's challenging to define in one trait because it's so inter-individual depending on who you're interacting with, what status this person is, how you see this person long term. Is it someone you want to impress now? Is it someone you want to date forever? But I mean, there's kind of two ways to answer it, right? So value that you provide in anything in life, this applies to friendships, this applies to business, this also applies to the dating world. If you bring genuine value in the sense that you're a competent, capable person who can solve problems, you will be attractive to almost all women forever. But ultimately, it's not necessarily the easiest way to attract a woman, because you don't necessarily go up to a woman and just say, hey, I can, you know, I'm a plumber and I also happen to know about buying back my time in business, and, you know, I can actually drive manual. You're not going to say that to a woman. She probably isn't going to see it at first sight. So that's probably more about how to keep a woman, how to attract a woman. I'd probably say mystery and intrigue, you know, be genuinely interesting and create a level of understanding that they feel they need to have about you and your personality and the way that you live. So if you introduce yourself on a message and say, hey, I'm Tom and I do this and this is everything you need to know about me, then naturally she kind of knows who you are and she doesn't really care that much. Whereas if you're quite generic and you're quite brief in the way that you describe yourself, the way that you describe your work, the way that you describe your interests, they start to become curious and they want to know themselves. Like, okay, then what do you do? And if you kind of navigate the question in a way where you never truly answer it, she will always seek the answer. And the interest that she has in you collectively is more. And I think this applies to messaging online. I think this applies to a first date. I think keeping things open-ended, showing that you're open-minded, will ultimately create more interest.
So without having a big following and, you know, things online for them to make somewhat of a preconception of, and you're being very vague and potentially what you think to be mysterious is actually coming across as just a little bit boring. How would you navigate that if you didn't have an Instagram full of content that would make her think, wow, this guy is actually quite interesting, he lives an interesting life?
It's actually a very good question, because if you look at any of the guys that are good with women now and guys that happen to have those tangibles that you mentioned, the supercars, the big Instagrams, actually I think almost all of them will tell you that they were as good as, if not better, with women before any of those things, because they actually make it harder to find a good concentration of women. The total number of people attracted in you might be higher, but the concentration of that are good partners that are willing to bond monogamously, offer you warm energy and be a good partner is much smaller as a percentile. So actually I don't necessarily think any guys need those tangibles to be good with women. They are trophies of your success as a guy, not tools to attract women. Ultimately what attracts women is confidence, your willingness to be on a path with purpose, and the way that you carry yourself around them. If you've got alpha energy and you carry that with confidence, and you have the confidence to walk up to a woman, introduce her, compliment her if you wish in a way where it looks like you mean it, open the door for her, make nice gestures, speak with a deep voice, speak confidently and concisely, say what you mean what you say. These sort of things are always going to carry more weight in terms of attraction than turning up in a Lambo looking like a dork.
So how important is status in terms of attracting women?
When it comes to dating, status is just getting your foot through the door. It is not enough to seal the deal. If you're a footballer, but you don't have the confidence, you don't have the dress sense, you don't keep your head high and mean what you say, you aren't going to seal the deal with women anywhere near as much as a guy who technically has less status as a tradie. If he walks through the door, sharp beard, dress sense, purpose, means what he says, confident, he's going to seal the deal 10 times more than the footballer.
What are the biggest red flags you're looking out for in a woman?
The list goes on. There are a plethora of red flags that you can look for as a guy and women. And what I should make clear on red flags is that they aren't necessarily reasons why you can't bond. They are just things that you should consider when potentially dating. So key examples of where that's relevant are things like daddy issues. Okay, if a woman has daddy issues, that's potentially a problem, but it also might not be, right? And that's something that we've got to make crystal clear on this, that when we're looking at red flags, we have to understand that you can still bond successfully with a woman and she can be a great partner even if she has a red flag. It's just a case for you of being aware of what that red flag is and then identifying whether it's a problem. So we're looking at things like irresponsibility, being secretive, liars, party girls, girls who go on holiday, violent girls, girls with male friends, promiscuity, wandering eyes, alpha widows. These are all examples of red flags.
So what exactly is an alpha widow and why should they be avoided?
Well, an alpha widow is essentially a woman that has previously been with an alpha and has been hurt by said alpha. She will then typically lean into other guys, potentially betas, guys that aren't her hypergamous best option, as a means of cushioning how she feels. If she's sad and upset that this guy has left her, she might get with this beta in order to just make things feel a little bit better in the meantime, and she'll actually use him as a means of remembering the previous partner. So where it's important as a guy is, if you aren't her hypergamous best option right now, or you aren't better than her previous partner, you're at a risk of being with an alpha widow there. And that's a potential concern for you, because if she's dating you to reminisce her previous partner, she will almost indefinitely never bond with you monogamously. And that's a concern. And what we've got to consider here is that she, again, we'll use an example of Ronaldo because he's a G. If she was with Ronaldo and now she gets with you, and Ronaldo texted her and said, hey, come back, would she go back? Probably. That's not a situation that you want to be in as a guy, especially a guy that's chasing excellence, a guy with purpose. You can't be putting yourself in that kind of position.
It's an interesting perspective on the alpha widow concept. It's not something that I've actually come across in the past. You also mentioned about male friends. What's your perspective on that as a whole in terms of girls having male friends?
I mean, there's nothing categorically wrong with guys and girls being friends. It's not illegal, it's not disrespectful, but I just find it hard to believe that it's a genuine interaction. When two dudes are friends, there's a purpose there. When girls are friends, there's a purpose there. When girls and guys date, there's a purpose there. But when girls and guys are friends, I struggle to understand, like, what is that transaction? What do you actually want from each other? Because you're not good friends for each other. The guy is probably only there because he's waiting for his chance to fuck her. That's the truth of it. Because if she was lying in bed with him and she put it on him, 100% of guys would probably take that chance. That's the reality. And so, as a girl, if you've got male friends, I think they should really be questioning the intentions of that guy. And so if I'm looking to bond monogamously with a said girl, and she's got a plethora of guys that she's apparent friends with, they're potentially people that will get the chance to try and interfere with my relationship. And for me as a guy, that's a concern, that's a red flag. It might not be her fault, and it might be something that's easy to fix, but it's a red flag. I've got to be aware of that in order to navigate that situation optimally. So when a girl has a plethora of male friends, as a guy, it's a red flag. Alarm bell should be ringing. I should be trying to understand more about that dynamic.
So you've been seeing a girl, you've noticed that she likes to go out. She goes out maybe once a week. Not all the time, not 2, 3, 4 times a week, maybe like a uni girl would, but still on a consistent basis, 3, 4, 5 times a month. What's your stance on that?
I think you've got to question the reasoning for that, because girls are going to be making decisions for different reasons, but frankly, I think you should match your seriousness with that person based on the seriousness they have towards their life. And as a girl that's going out partying, weighing up her options in the sexual marketplace, she's not really taking life too seriously there, so therefore you shouldn't probably take her too seriously. Excuse my French, but I don't think it's the best idea to try and turn a hoe into a housewife. Ultimately, those that are best to bond with make themselves clear in society. It's the girls that you find in the retail shops, it's the girls that you find in the libraries, it's the girls that you find in hospitality. It's girls that you pick up in organic situations that typically predict better long-term success. I don't know many guys that turn up to the club at 2 a.m. to pick up their missus, having sat at home for the last 6 hours wondering who she's been talking to take her home while she's drunk and then have a good relationship there. I think there's very little case studies that are in favor of that being a good long-term partnership. Most of those occasions lead to people breaking up. They lead to the guys getting hurt because the woman was promiscuous. And I think the data that we have on that in society that we all see all the time should give us a good insight into the fact that actually they're not great partners.
So me, myself, I'm 21. So people my age are at university. Say if you were to be with a girl who currently is at university, how would you go about navigating that sort of relationship, being such a long distance away from each other potentially? So
you say long distance. So if we're implying that they're far away, a couple of hours cross country, it does become more challenging because you haven't got the chance to be spontaneous as much there. I think the best way to navigate relationships with women as a whole, as a rule, is to be quite spontaneous. Hey, what are you doing right now? Pick you up right now. That spontaneity is attractive, and it's also convenient for your schedule as a guy who's chasing excellence and doing as much as he can every day. I think when people are further away, you kind of have to plan things. You've got this monotonous drive every time. It becomes a little more challenging. It can work, of course it can. Anything can work. You can make it anything's possible in this world, and that applies to all aspects of life. But I do think that you're setting yourself up for a potentially tough time, especially with a girl at uni. It also depends what she's doing and what kind of person she is. If she's gone to university and she's staying, out of town, she's studying medicine, then your chances of success there are much higher than if she's staying in dorms and studying marketing or health and beauty or whatever these typical uni girls go to study, right? They're there for the experience, quite frankly, because there's not much that a degree in health and beauty can do for you compared to just getting involved. So the evident truth of the situation is that you're going for the experience, which is cool, but you're not in a position to bond very well there. So you've got to ask yourself now, why is she at uni? And how does this affect our relationship? And you've got to be truthful to yourself there. Guys are more in denial than they want to admit about that situation. They kind of feel like they have to deal with the card that they've been dealt that, oh, well, she's just gone to uni, she's living her life, she's 21, she wants to experience it. No, she's going to uni to offer herself out to guys that are there. You might not want to believe it, but that's the truth. So as a guy, accept the situation and handle accordingly, or be in denial. You have two choices.
Yeah, I feel as if a lot of people are in denial about that sort of thing in terms of going to university, living in different cities. Say the guy will go to a university in Bristol and the female might go to university in Newcastle. They're such a distance away from each other, it's such a long way away, that there is such an opportunity there for something to go wrong, for promiscuity, for wandering eyes, for example. I've also noticed a lot of my friends or people like that may not be in relationships, but what they will do is when they go to these sort of places is to hop on dating apps, Tinder, Hinge, to name a few. Do you feel as if you could find a long-term partner on these sort of websites, dating apps?
You could say never. I'd really struggle to take someone serious that I've met on a dating app. I personally don't use them. I haven't since I was in my teens, really, because I don't think there's long-term utility for the app, because I'm looking for a woman with quite a high sexual marketplace value. I typically don't find those kind of women on a dating app, because why are they on a dating app? Well, 90% of women are on there for reasons that lower their marketplace value. And so it doesn't really make sense for guys that are genuinely chasing excellence, guys that are striving to find the best partners, guys that are trying to put themselves around the best caliber of women. You ain't going to find them on a dating app. Now, I'm not saying there isn't any gems out there. I'm sure there are some girls that are out in the hills somewhere that just can't seem to actually come across men and they jump on a dating app. I'm sure there's been case studies to suggest that, right? But your average John on a dating app is not going to be high marketplace value. And as a guy that's chasing excellence, that's a concern. And I think you're setting out to really not find perfection there. Now, you've got to ask yourself why you're doing it. That's the most important thing here. You've got to understand why you're on the dating app. Because as a guy, if you're just looking to transact and you find a girl that's also just looking to transact, and essentially you've mutually agreed by matching on this dating app that you both want to partake in a one-night stand, then fine, you've transacted, you both know it's nothing serious, you haven't got to worry about a marketplace value because you're just meeting her one time, and that's that, job done, right? But for me, I'm not at a point in my life where I'm just chasing one-night stands. I've never really been that kind of guy anyway, but even now, I don't really want to sleep with a girl unless I can see something building in the future there. I think it's quite a pointless transaction for a guy to just set out to find girls with no purpose, to just keep matching with consistently with no development there. Nothing material ever comes, and I think that's quite a waste of time. If you're young, you're 18, you're 19, you're fresh to uni spinning plates, it's not a bad idea, but I think eventually you've got to ask yourself, what am I actually looking for on this dating app, and why don't I just go out of my way to find real valuable women in the real world?
So I think for the most part, a lot of girls will actually use these dating apps to seek validation that they may not be getting in their lives on a one-to-one perspective. So I don't think that they can all be tied with the same brush as they are a girl who sweats Tinder, for example. These girls may have created an account and then forgotten about it. So it'd be difficult to always have the perspective that you couldn't build a relationship with a girl who is on dating apps. I mean, me, myself, I've gone on there in the past. When traveling, especially, I may go on there to sort of have a look what the girls are looking like. And that isn't always from a sexual standpoint, not necessarily seeking to then go ahead and find a girl in the city that I'm staying at or the country that I'm in, to then go ahead and sleep with them. But maybe to even build a connection and be shown around a city, for example. This isn't from a past experience, but this is something that could definitely be done. Could you ever see yourself being with a girl who may have spent extended periods of time traveling by themselves?
I think just in the same way that we spoke earlier about girls that go partying, potentially girls that want to go on holiday, it's not a problem. And I'm sure there are examples of great girls that could be fantastic partners that happen to have gone traveling alone. But I think what you've got to ask yourself again is like, why are they going? What is their intention? Because there are going to be certain girls that are clearly traveling as a means to try and open up their dating pool to more men in a different place. There are girls that are trying to escape the reality that they've created from previous bad decisions. So ultimately, you've got to ask yourself, why are they going? I think that's going to give you the key answer as to whether or not she could potentially be a good partner. It's kind of difficult for me to answer a question. I'm like, is she going to be a good partner when I don't know anything about her other than that she's gone traveling? But I would say, just like anything else, you've got to ask yourself the questions of why. You've got to understand the reasoning for the decisions that they've made.
So we've touched on loads of red flags here. But when you're actually practically applying these things and you're out in the real world and you're out speaking to girls and potentially building a connection with these girls, how do we go about actually dealing with someone who's been alpha widowed, somebody who goes out all the time? Because there's a fine line between molding someone to fit, you know, your dream woman or how you'd like them to behave, and being manipulative in a sense that could be seen negative and made to be seen as you are toxic masculinity.
A couple of easy, very undescriptive ways to describe the answer to that would be, you can't polish a turd, you can't turn a hoe into a housewife. Ultimately, you've got to remember this as a guy. It's a little bit direct, it's a little bit insulting, but it's the only way to actually get inside people's heads, because everybody knows that they're red flags, but they just choose to accept them as they are. Oh, well, she keeps going out, you know, she doesn't seem to want to do anything for me, she demands that I watch what she likes on Netflix, and these are all problems, and guys just don't accept that they're a problem, and that's cool, but then don't moan when she cheats on you because you weren't her hypergamous best option, you didn't detect and deal with the red flags. Don't moan about the things coming back to get you if you didn't take your time to do your due diligence, understand this girl, and navigate the way to optimize the relationship from the get-go. Ultimately, they make rules for the beta and then they break them for the alpha. This is how women work. And 100% of women will actually agree with that, because if you give them the scenario that they say they don't sleep on the first date and then they're posed with a night with Ronaldo, they're going to do it. So every girl recognizes that it's true as well. And as a guy, if you choose to detect these red flags and then not deal with them, the consequences are going to be on you, because ultimately, how can you expect her to respect you if she's presenting problems and you don't care? Okay? When you chase excellence, it creates an aura that they can see, and they can feel the energy of a guy who is chasing excellence in the women that he spends time with. And so if you chase the perfection in every girl that you meet, you might never find it exactly, but you're going to come much closer than if you just accept what you're given.
Yeah, I think a lot of guys will choose to ignore these red flags, especially as a younger male. You may look past these things and think, oh, she's just young, she's just immature. That leads me on to something that you speak about very frequently, and I hear mentioned most days, and that's framing. How important is framing in a relationship, in any relationship, not just in a sexual relationship?
Well, in all aspects of life, as a male, we have a duty to hold frame in the relationships. There's a small percentile of interactions as a guy with other men that we look up to as mentors where holding frame isn't a good idea because it can come across disrespectful. A practical example of this would be, as a guy, if I'm in a UFC gym and, you know, I try and hold frame with all these fighters and teach them how to fight, it's not going to work out for me, right? So that's the time to be a sponge, accept that I step into their frame, and that's a great example of there. But aside from that, and I mean with women as a whole, to answer your question specifically, you want to hold frame in all interactions. Like water needs its piping, like artwork needs its framework. Every good essence, every bit of energy needs framing to keep the direction positive. And I think that with women, they have so much to offer, but they can only offer it to a high value guy who truly holds the framework. If the energy that they've got to give is something that can only be provided on the basis that they feel protected, they feel provided for, they feel safe and surrounded by what the masculine energy is and what it does for them, and we don't provide that as a guy, then we aren't going to get what we want from the woman. Ultimately, if we want her to bring her value as a female, the warmest of energies, the acts of service, it's not going to happen if we don't hold that frame. So getting in early on, and as a guy who asserts dominance in a gentleman-like way, picks up the bill, opens the car doors, evidently protects and provides through being in great physical shape and being competent and capable. These are the kind of things that demonstrate masculine values, that demonstrate frame, and therefore get the most out of the woman. So it isn't even a selfish reason, it's for the benefit of both parties, because when you're who you need to be as a masculine guy, she can be who she wants to be as a female, and we both profit from that.
So on the topic of framing, say for example, there's a girl who you may see, you may have a thing for, you may be sexually active with said girl. You may have known her for a number of years, maybe when you was in school, and now out in real life, you still know her, but she has a pre-built conception of you, of that person who you used to be. And now that may not align with who you are now and who you're aspiring to be. What does the reframing process look like?
This is a very real situation because it actually applies to me a lot as well. I've lived this because at school I was a bit of a dork. I didn't have many social skills. I had no value to provide. And so naturally, almost every girl was extremely uninterested in me, and rightly so, because I didn't provide any value. But quickly when I got out of school, I got into shape. I became a world champion powerlifter. I was very strong and capable physically. I also went into the world of business and I became very successful financially. And actually the combination of these material and immaterial values that I now have as a guy that showcase my competency and capabilities, all I need to do is get that across to them, and I guarantee they give a second chance. Because women accept that people grow up, and if we're referencing people at school, for example, then actually the most attractive guys currently weren't necessarily that at school. And although in some instances, if they've seen you doing certain things or they've seen a certain person, then it might be challenging to change that perception, because first impressions really do last and you don't always get a second chance at them. So if your first impression has been you involved in recreational drugs, you drastically drunk and out of control, then that's a little bit different. If you were just a little bit shy or you didn't have a lot of value to bring, then look, you're going to get the second chance. If you genuinely bring value and you get in front of them so they can feel that energy now, it'll be a completely different story.
Yeah, I think it's very, very much a difficult one to navigate when you put yourself in a position for failure to begin with. You mentioned their first impressions. Maybe in your younger years, in your late teen years, you may have been going to parties, doing drugs, acting degenerately. And then now you want to be perceived as a top drawer man in this instance, or someone of value, or someone who doesn't do drugs or involve themselves in anything really to do with that. It can be met with conflict, being like, well, how can you say that based on who you were before?
What's also challenging about that is that it doesn't necessarily allow for that mystery and intrigue that we spoke about earlier being so important. If they've known who you were from school and they've watched your journey, although they may now be more attracted to you than they previously were, they may be more open-minded to talking to you than they previously were, ultimately they haven't got that overwhelming intrigue into who you actually are. That is a big part of initial attraction. And if you are just a guy who they already know everything about, but you happen to now be in shape or you happen to now be successful, that's great and your chances are higher, but you still might not provide enough overwhelming interest because they don't have the intrigue or mystery. Compared with a guy that they know from somewhere else or don't know better off, then actually the mystery and intrigue of trying to work out who that person is more stimulating for them than the achievements of the person they already know. So I think, although it's definitely going to be a better chance now, ultimately, if they've known you for a long time, the mystery and the intrigue not being there will still hinder your chances a little bit.
So in this particular instance, and under these circumstances that we're discussing here, would it be best to not approach it with the mindset of, I am going to reframe this relationship?
I don't think you can have that mindset. I think that's a dangerous place to be. I think guys have to have the frame of mind that they can genuinely do anything. You have to be able to believe you can achieve whatever revenue targets in your business. You have to be able to believe that you can achieve whatever net worth you want, whatever physical shape you want to be in, whatever performance metrics you want to achieve, or whatever women you want to date. I think it's a dangerous frame of mind to think, oh no, she's out of my league. No, she's not out of your league. You just haven't promoted yourself yet. She might be a Premier League woman, but if you're a League One guy, is that her fault or your fault? It's yours. So level up, and then she is in your league. It's a frame of mind. Maybe you don't feel like you deserve her yet, and that's fine, because that shows that you're aware of your surroundings. That shows that you're actually perspicacious enough to understand your position in the world. Do something about it then.
So how important, based on that understanding, how important is knowing your level, not shooting too high? So like you say, if you're a League One footballer and trying to mess with the Champions League girls, you're 9 times out of 10 going to be met with
a 3-0 defeat.
Exactly. So how important is that, knowing where you stand and where your sexual marketplace value is right now? How important is that when approaching different girls?
There's always the opportunity for an upset. If you genuinely have enough confidence, a League One team can beat a Premier League team. We've seen it a number of times, and that can happen in the dating world. Sometimes I've actually met girls that are genuinely beautiful, and at the surface they seem like great women, and then their boyfriend, I'm like, what? Like, this guy's a loser. How's that happened? And it genuinely can happen, because there can be some overwhelming attraction that she has to something material or immaterial that he has that we don't even know about, or that she just finds really attractive for whatever reason. So it's definitely a dangerous place to be if you have the frame of mind that it's not achievable. But it's an even better place to be if you have the frame of mind that actually just chasing excellence in your own life every day will get you the opportunity to date whoever you want anyway long term. So honestly, just again, it goes back to the message here. The clear, concise message from me in this meet today has been actually put your thought process around women to the side and focus on yourself. Chase excellence, they appear.
So we often hear the 80-20 rule in business, in life. Do you want to shed a little bit more insight into what that means and how that actually works in the sexual marketplace?
Well, I presume what you're asking there is, why do the top 20% of men attract the top 80% of women? And really the answer is quite simple, and it's because the top 20% of men are the men with the most purpose, the men that are striving for excellence every single day in all verticals. They're chasing wealth and success, they're chasing power in the social hierarchy, they're chasing competency and mastery of their skill set, they're in great physical shape, they're respected by people. Ultimately, these things are being tapped into every day by the top 20% of guys, so it's only natural that with them being the most attractive traits to women, that 80% of women want those guys. And so really the take home for any guys watching this that want to level up their own game and attract more better women, focus on yourself. There is no game that is going to astronomically change your success rate with women. You can change your close rates, you can change your reply rates, you can change your chances to kind of get out there, but ultimately bonding with a very high value woman long term isn't something that can be forced or falsified with little tips and tricks along the way. They're just ways to improve conversion rates. Actually, what will stimulate a high value woman long term is by you offering a lot of value in itself, holding frame, chasing excellence, and you can only do that by working on yourself.